The unexpected encounters and trudged across the cracked desert earth, the sun hanging low in the sky. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust with every step. It had been a long day, and the scorching heat had taken its toll. He scanned the barren wasteland with tired eyes, hoping for any sign of valuable salvage. After the war, everything had changed, and survival was a constant struggle. Scavengers like Zane made their living by finding what others had left behind. But it was getting harder. Most of the valuable technology was already picked clean. As he walked, Zane's attention was caught by a strange sight. At first, he thought it was just another mirage, but the closer he got, the more real it appeared. There, lying on the ground near a small outcrop of rocks, was a figure. A woman, but she wasn't human. Her skin was a soft shade of green, and her veins pulsed with a faint purple light. Zane's heart skipped a beat. She was an alien, and her presence in this desolate place made no sense. He paused for a moment, unsure of what to do. He had heard stories about the aliens who had invaded his home world, but most of them were just rumors. They were supposed to be monsters, ruthless invaders who had wiped out whole cities. The war had left the human race scattered and weak, but this woman, she was different. She wasn't the terrifying warrior he had expected. She was vulnerable, lying on the ground with blood soaking her clothes, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Beside her, a small child clung to her, barely able to keep her eyes open. Zane's heart wrenched. He had seen enough death to last a lifetime, but something about this scene struck him deep. His first instinct was to turn away, to walk on and leave them behind. After all, the aliens were the enemy, right? But then the child looked up at him, her wide, fear-filled eyes meeting his dot. Something inside Zane shifted. He couldn't just leave them here to die. He glanced around, scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. The desert was still and quiet, but he knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. He moved cautiously toward the alien woman, keeping his distance. He didn't know much about the alien species, but he knew enough to be wary. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Helping them could mean trouble. It could bring danger to his doorstep. But the child's eyes, those pleading, terrified eyes, kept him rooted in place. Zane knelt beside the woman, his hands shaking slightly. He reached out to touch her arm, checking for a pulse. It was weak, but it was there. She wasn't dead yet. He quickly assessed her injuries. There were several gashes along her side, blood still oozing from the wounds. Her clothes were torn, and her breathing was labored. The child, who looked to be no older than 5 or 6, was clinging to her mother's side, trembling. Zane's heart ached. "Hey," Zane whispered softly, trying to rouse her. "Are you alive?" The alien woman stirred slightly, her eyes flickering open. She looked at him with confusion and pain, her voice coming out in a weak, barely audible whisper. "Please, help." Zane didn't fully understand what she had said, but the desperation in her voice was clear. Without thinking, he acted. He gently moved the child aside, making sure to keep his hands away from the woman's wounds. He quickly removed his pack and set to work. The medkit he carried wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He cleaned the woman's wounds as best he could, applying bandages with careful hands. He could feel her shudder under his touch, but she didn't pull away. There was a quiet moment between them, no words. Just the sound of Zane's breathing and the faint rustling of the wind. As Zane worked, the child finally spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, but Zane caught the words. "Is she going to be okay?" Zane looked down at the girl. She was pale, her face a mix of fear and exhaustion. The sight broke his heart. "I'm doing what I can," Zane said, his voice more confident than he felt. "She'll be okay. I won't let anything happen to her." The child nodded weakly, but her eyes never left him. Zane could see the trust forming in them, even though they had just met. Once Zane finished tending to the alien woman's wounds, he sat back, wiping his hands on his pants. The woman was still unconscious, but her breathing seemed steadier. The child, now quieter, sat beside her mother, looking up at Zane with wide eyes full of questions he couldn't answer. Zane didn't know what to do next. He had helped them, for now, but he couldn't stay here forever. His camp was miles away, and he wasn't sure how long he could keep them safe. But there was no denying the fact that he had made a choice. He had chosen to help them, to protect them for the time being. The question now was, what would that choice cost him? The alien woman stirred again, her eyes opening slightly. She met Zane's gaze, her expression full of gratitude, but also something else as strange, unspoken understanding. She was an enemy, yet somehow they were connected in this moment. Connected by survival, Zane wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear. He had made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't turn back now. He had to protect them, no matter the cost. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, Zane made a promise to himself. He would keep them safe no matter what, even if it meant his life. A fragile trust. Zane had never been a man who believed in fate, but as he sat beside the fire that night, watching the alien woman and child sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. He had seen enough violence, enough death to last a lifetime, but this was different. This wasn't just a chance encounter. There was something about the alien woman, her green skin, her alien eyes, that made him feel like he was part of something that was about to change the course of everything. The fire crackled softly, its warmth pushing back against the cold desert air. Zane sat on a rock near the fire, his eyes never leaving the two aliens as they rested. The woman had finally slipped into a deeper sleep, her wounds bandaged, but her body still frail. The child, her little face marked with dirt and exhaustion, lay curled up at her side. Zane could hear the soft, steady rhythm of their breathing, a contrast to the harsh wind that howled outside his camp. Zane had helped them, but now the question was, why had he done it? Was it out of kindness, or was there something deeper at play? He'd been raised to believe that aliens were the enemy, invaders who had come to destroy his people. That belief had been instilled in him since childhood. But here now, with the woman and child before him, that belief felt distant, almost like a lie. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. This wasn't the time for doubts. The world they lived in was harsh, and if he was going to survive, he couldn't afford to question everything. He had made a choice, and now he had to live with it. He just wasn't sure what that meant yet. As the night deepened, Zane's thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound. He froze, listening closely. The wind was still howling, but there was something else, something out of place. The sound was distant, but it carried with it an unmistakable weight. It was a low hum, a mechanical hum, like the sound of a ship's engines in the distance. Zane's heart skipped a beat. He stood quickly, moving silently to the edge of the camp. His eyes scanned the horizon, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. There was no sign of danger, but the hum was getting louder. Whoever or whatever it was, they were getting closer. The alien woman stirred in her sleep, her eyes flickering open for a moment. She looked at Zane, her expression confused but grateful. She whispered something in her native tongue words. Zane couldn't understand, but he caught the meaning behind them. She was asking him to be careful. Zane's mind raced. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He had been out here long enough to know when something wasn't right. The hum was growing louder by the second. Whoever was out there wasn't trying to hide. Zane's instincts screamed at him to act, but he couldn't just leave the woman and child behind. He had made a promise, and he wasn't going to break. He moved quickly, his footsteps light and deliberate as he checked the perimeter of the camp. The sound of the ship's engines was now unmistakable. It wasn't far off. The question wasn't who was coming, it was what they wanted. Were they allies or enemies, and how long before they arrived? The alien woman sat up now, her face tense, her eyes scanning the desert around them. She knew something was wrong, just as Zane did. She wasn't as weak as she had been earlier. Despite her injuries, she stood with a steady grace, her posture alert and ready. Zane didn't hesitate. "Stay low," he whispered to her. "I'll handle this." But the woman didn't move. Instead, she looked at him with a mixture of understanding and resolve. She shook her head, speaking to him in her language once more. The words were foreign, but Zane didn't need to understand them to know what she meant. She wasn't going to let him face whatever was coming alone. There was an unspoken bond between them now, and for reasons he didn't fully understand, she trusted him with her life. Zane nodded, his heart pounding. The hum was now deafening. It was close, too close. He crouched down, making sure his weapon was ready, his senses heightened. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever was coming would decide the fate of them all. And just as the hum reached its peak, a shadow appeared in the distance, outlined by the glow of the moonlight. Zane's grip tightened on his weapon. There was no turning back now. He wasn't just protecting himself anymore. He was protecting them, the alien woman and child. And that meant everything. He turned back to the woman, meeting her gaze. She nodded once, and Zane knew she was ready. Whatever this was, they would face it together. And together, they would survive. The alien threat. The wind howled again, its eerie howl carrying with it an unsettling chill. Zane's heart beat faster as the hum of the approaching ship grew louder, the sound vibrating in his chest. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Whatever it wasn't just some random traveler passing by. This wasn't the first time he had encountered ships out in the desert, but it was different this time. The way the ship moved, most deliberately told him it wasn't lost or just looking for shelter. They were coming for something. Or someone. Zane crouched low, his hand gripping the hilt of his weapon, his mind racing. He'd spent years in this wasteland, learning the signs of danger, but this felt different. The alien woman's eyes, once filled with confusion and fear, had shifted to something else, an understanding of the danger that was approaching. She stood with a quiet grace beside him, her once weak body now more alert, her posture rigid. Her eyes scanned the horizon, her alien instincts honed for situations like this. Zane didn't speak. There was no need. They both knew what was coming. The question was whether or not they could survive it. As the shadow grew larger, Zane could make out the outline of the ship, sleek and dark, with jagged edges that seemed to glimmer in the dim moonlight. It wasn't like any human ship he had ever seen. The engines hummed with an unnatural, mechanical precision, making the hairs on his arms stand up. This was no ordinary alien craft. He could tell it was military grade, built for speed and destruction. The alien woman's expression hardened. She whispered something to Zane, words he didn't understand, but the look in her eyes said everything. She knew what this ship meant. It meant danger. It meant that the peace they had fought so hard to protect was about to shatter without warning. She moved swiftly, positioning herself in front of the child, protecting her as though she were guarding a treasure more precious than life itself. The child clung to her mother's side, her small form shaking with fear, but her eyes held a fierce determination. Zane had never seen anything like it. In that moment, he realized something he hadn't fully understood before. This was more than just survival for the alien woman. She was protecting her legacy, her people, and most of all, child. The ship touched down, its heavy mechanical landing shaking the ground beneath them. The air around them grew thick with tension as the hatch on the side of the ship opened. With a hiss, figures began to emerge, tall and imposing, their armor gleaming in the moonlight. They were alien soldiers. From the look of it tanned, they didn't look like they were here for a friendly visit. Zane's fingers twitched on his weapon, his mind running through escape routes. He knew they wouldn't be able to outrun these soldiers. They were too well equipped, too well trained. But there was one thing Zane had learned in his years of scavenging the wasteland: fighting was sometimes the only option. The leader of the group stepped forward, his presence commanding and terrifying. His alien features were sharp, his eyes glowing with a menacing light. Zane instinctively took a step back, trying to shield the alien woman and her child from the approaching danger. His mind raced. He knew the stories. He knew that these were the alien enforcers, the ones sent to eradicate the last remnants of their kind. But why were they here? What did they want with these two? "Step aside, human," the leader's voice boomed in a language Zane didn't understand. The command was cold and authoritative, a tone that left no room for argument. Zane didn't move. The alien woman stepped forward, standing tall despite her injuries. She met the soldier's gaze, her expression unwavering. She spoke in her language, her voice calm but strong. Zane could sense the power in her words, though he couldn't understand them. The soldier paused, his gaze narrowing. "You've chosen the wrong side, alien," he growled, his hand reaching for the weapon at his side. "Your people's time is over?" Zane's stomach tightened. He had seen enough battles to know what would happen next. These soldiers didn't negotiate. They didn't offer mercy. If they had come for the woman and her child, they wouldn't stop until they were both dead or worse. The alien woman turned back to Zane, her eyes pleading. There was no time for words now. She had protected her child for so long, but she couldn't protect them both anymore. Zane had to act. He had to make a choice. This was no longer just about survival, it was about a fight for their lives. Zane stepped forward, positioning himself in front of the alien woman and child. His weapon was drawn, his mind set. There was no turning back now. He had promised to protect them, and now he had to keep that promise. Without another word, the first shot was fired. It wasn't from Zane's side, it was from the alien soldier, the blast of energy lighting up the dark desert night. Zane ducked instinctively, the blast missing him by mere inches. His pulse raced. He had no idea what they were dealing with. But he knew one thing for certain. This was going to be a fight to the death. The price of protection: the desert was eerily quiet after the initial explosion of blaster fire. Zane's heart was pounding in his chest as the dust settled around them. The air was thick with the smell of burned ozone and the faint echo of battle still ringing in his ears. The alien soldiers were relentless, their sleek armor glinting in the moonlight, their weapons poised to strike at any moment. Zane's mind raced. He had always prided himself on being able to think fast, to survive by outsmarting his enemies. But now, with the alien woman and child behind him, everything felt different. They were counting on him, and the weight of that responsibility pressed down on him like 1,000 tons. Zane took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. He could see the alien soldiers advancing, closing in on their position, their weapons raised. They weren't just here for a fight, they were here to end it all. Zane knew the battle would be lost if they stayed where they were. Their cover was weak, and the desert didn't offer much in the way of protection. They had to move. He had to get them to safety. But how? The alien woman was still standing tall beside him, her expression calm but determined. The child, clutching her mother's leg, looked up at Zane, her eyes wide with fear. Zane didn't want to show it, but he was scared too. This wasn't a battle he could win with just his wits and a few makeshift traps. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Then it hit him. He had one last trick up his sleeve. It wasn't much, but it was all he had left. "Stay close," Zane said, his voice low, steady. He didn't give the alien woman a chance to argue. She nodded without hesitation, understanding the urgency in his words. Zane led them toward a narrow ravine that ran through the desert. It was hidden from sight, a small passageway carved into the land by ancient winds. It wasn't much of a shelter, but it was the only option they had. If they could make it there, they might have a chance to regroup. The alien soldiers weren't far behind. Zane could hear their footsteps crunching on the dry sand, their voices low but unmistakable. They were closing in on them, and Zane knew they wouldn't be able to outrun them for long. He had to buy them time. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small device, a remote trigger that controlled a set of explosive charges he had planted around the camp earlier. It wasn't enough to take out the entire squad of soldiers, but it would slow them down. It would give them a few precious minutes to get to safety. Zane glanced over his shoulder to make sure. The alien woman and child were still behind him. They were, though the woman looked as if she were preparing for something worse. Zane couldn't blame her. Every instinct in her told her to fight, to protect her child at all costs. But she trusted him. And that was all that mattered. With a quick motion, Zane activated the device. The explosion was deafening, sending a shockwave through the desert. The ground trembled beneath his feet as the first blast went off, followed by another. The alien. Soldiers' shouts filled the air, a mix of surprise and fury. It worked. For a moment, the soldiers were thrown off balance, disoriented by the blasts. Zane didn't wait to see if the explosions had done their job. He motioned for the alien woman and child to follow him, pushing them forward toward the ravine. His heart raced, but he kept his pace steady. They couldn't afford to stop now. The alien woman moved swiftly beside him, her body surprisingly agile, despite the injuries she had sustained. Zane couldn't help but feel a flicker of admiration for her. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a fighter. She was just as determined to live as he was, and that made them stronger together. Behind them, the sounds of the alien soldiers grew fainter. Zane could hear their voices rising in anger, their weapons firing into the desert, but they didn't follow immediately. The blasts had given them just enough of a delay. Zane could only hope it would be enough. They reached the ravine just as the last of the explosions faded. Zane ducked into the narrow passage, his heart still pounding. The air was cooler here, the shadows deep and comforting. But they couldn't stay long. Zane knew it was only a matter of time before the soldiers regrouped and began searching for them. He motioned for the alien woman to crouch down beside him, his hand on his weapon as he peered out from their hiding spot. They had a brief moment of respite, but it wouldn't last. Zane's mind raced, thinking of their next move. There had to be a way out of this, but with every passing second, the odds stacked higher against them. They were trapped in a hostile desert, hunted by enemies who would stop at nothing to finish what they had started. The alien woman turned to him, her expression softening for the first time since they had met. She didn't speak, but her eyes said it all. She was grateful. Grateful for his help, for his protection. But Zane knew she wasn't out of danger yet. They weren't out of danger. And the price of protection, the price of his decision to stand beside them, was about to become even higher. Asterisk. A final stand. The sound of the soldiers' voices faded into the distance, but the feeling of danger lingered in the air. Zane sat crouched at the mouth of the ravine, his back pressed against the jagged stone wall, his eyes scanning the surrounding desert. The dim light of the moon cast long shadows across the landscape, but it was the silence that unnerved him. It was too quiet. The kind of quiet that came before a storm. Zane had seen enough battles to recognize when the enemy was regrouping. The alien soldiers hadn't given up, they were just waiting for the right moment to strike. The delay had only bought them a little time, but time was all they had. Zane knew they couldn't stay in this ravine forever. The longer they hid, the more likely it was that the soldiers would find them. He had to make a choice, and the weight of that decision pressed on him like a heavy burden. Beside him, the alien woman and child huddled together, the child's small hand gripping her mother's. Despite her injuries, the woman's posture was straight, her eyes focused and calm. She was a warrior, Zane realized. Not in the way most soldiers were, but in the quiet strength she carried within her. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. The look in her eyes was one of resolve, as if she knew exactly what was coming next. Zane couldn't help but feel the same. There was no escaping the soldiers. If they wanted them dead, they would find a way to do it. There was no way out of this, not unless he made a stand. He had promised to protect them, and this was the moment he had to make good on that promise. He turned to the alien woman, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can't stay here. They'll find us. We have to fight back." She nodded slowly, her lips pressing into a tight line. She didn't need to ask why. She had known the danger from the beginning. But there was something in her eyes, quiet. Understanding that this fight wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something deeper. It was about honor. And maybe, just maybe, it was about hope. Zane stood, brushing the dust off his clothes as he checked his weapon once more. It was an old model, a relic from the war, but it had never failed him before. He adjusted his grip, preparing for what was to come. "We'll fight together," he said, more to himself than to her. "We fight for each other." The woman stepped forward, her alien features hardening with the weight of her decision. She had no words, only a quiet nod. But Zane could see it in her eyes. She was ready. The child, too, stood with them, her small form trembling but determined. Zane knew there was no turning back. They couldn't hide any longer. This wasn't just about saving themselves. It was about proving something, about showing that even in the face of certain death, they would not bow down. They would fight, and they would fight together. The sound of footsteps reached Zane's ears, and he stiffened. The soldiers were coming. He could hear their boots crunching on the sand, their low voices filling the air. Zane's pulse quickened as he motioned for the alien woman and child to follow him. They had one chance to make this work. One chance to survive. Zane led them up a small ridge, positioning them behind a large rock outcrop that would give them some cover. He had planned to use the terrain to their advantage, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. The soldiers were too well equipped, too well trained. But Zane had one thing they didn't: his will to survive. And that would make all the difference. The alien woman stepped up beside him, her weapon raised, her gaze fixed on the approaching enemy. She was calm, focused, every move deliberate. Zane couldn't help but admire her strength. He had thought she was just a victim, someone in need of saving. But now, standing beside her, he saw her for what she truly was, a warrior. Like him, the first soldier appeared over the ridge, his helmet gleaming in the moonlight. Zane didn't hesitate. He fired, the shot ringing out loud and clear in the night air. The soldier staggered, falling to the ground with a grunt. But there was no time to celebrate. More soldiers appeared, their weapons aimed directly at Zane and the alien woman. Zane's heart raced, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He could hear the child's soft breath behind him, feel the weight of the alien woman's gaze on his back. They were relying on him now. He couldn't fail them. He fired again, taking down another soldier. The alien woman moved with incredible speed, her weapon flashing as she fired with deadly accuracy. She was a force to be reckoned with, a true soldier, and she was standing beside him. Fighting by his side, Zane could hear the soldiers shouting, their movements becoming frantic. They had underestimated them. Zane and the alien woman weren't just fighting for their lives, they were fighting for something more. They were fighting to show that no matter how hopeless it seemed, they would not go down without a fight. But then, from the corner of his eye, Zane saw something that made his blood run cold. A large ship hovering just above the ridge, its engines glowing brightly. It was a reinforcement ship. More soldiers, more weapons. They weren't just outnumbered, now they were outmatched. The situation was turning dire, and Zane knew they didn't have much time left. "This is it," Zane whispered, his heart sinking. "We either win now, or we die trying." The alien woman gave him a determined look. She nodded once, and without another word, they both stepped out from behind cover, ready to face whatever came next. The ultimate sacrifice, the sky had darkened completely by the time the warship hovered above them, its massive form blocking out the stars. Zane's eyes flicked to the alien woman standing beside him. The child clung to her, her small face pale with fear, but her eyes reflected a quiet determination. It felt like the world had stopped spinning, time slowing down as the massive ship descended, its engines roaring with power. Zane knew it wasn't just a ship, this was their doom if they couldn't make it out of here. The soldiers below them, still regrouping from their failed assault, were now joined by an army of reinforcements. They had underestimated Zane and the alien woman, but now they were prepared to finish what they had started. The sheer numbers of soldiers advancing toward them made Zane's blood run cold. His chances of survival had just gotten slimmer. Zane's breath came in shallow gasps. Every instinct in his body told him to run, to find a way out, to keep the woman and child safe. But there was no escape from this, no place to hide. The desert was vast, but not vast enough to outrun an entire battalion of soldiers and their heavily armed warship. He turned to the alien woman, who'd been scanning the horizon. Her gaze, though filled with exhaustion, remained sharp and focused. She was already preparing herself for the worst, not with fear, but with an unshakable resolve. She had come this far, and now it was clear she would not let her child die without a fight. Zane, the alien woman's voice was steady, though there was a deep sorrow hidden beneath it. She had turned to face him, the desperation in her eyes turning to something more profound. "There is something I must do. You need to understand. It is the only way." Zane's mind raced. He knew the woman had abilities beyond what he had seen, but he had no idea what she was talking about. She had been hiding something from him all along, something about her race. Something powerful that she had kept sealed inside her. It was obvious now that she had been protecting that power for a reason, but at what cost? You're not, Zane began, his voice trembling. He didn't want to believe what his gut was telling him. You can't just give up. Still a chance. We can make it out of here together. The alien woman placed her hand on his shoulder, her touch cool and reassuring. Zane, you don't understand. If we run now, they'll hunt us down. They won't stop. They'll kill you. They'll kill her. Her eyes flicked to her child, who was holding on to her tightly, trembling. And they'll never stop hunting my people. This fight, it ends today. Zane swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. No, there has to be another way. The woman's gaze softened, but her expression hardened with determination. I've been running for too long. We've been hiding. But not anymore. I have a power that could change everything, but it comes with a price, and I'm willing to pay it. It's the only way we can survive. Zane's heart skipped a beat. He could see the way her body tensed, her energy crackling in the air around her. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a force that had been waiting for the right moment to act. And now, that moment had come. "What kind of power?" Zane asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The alien woman's lips pressed into Vin. "A thin line, a forbidden power. One that can obliterate their forces, one that could end this war. But it comes at a cost I must bear alone." Zane's breath caught in his throat. "No, don't do this. We'll find another way." The woman's gaze softened, her eyes locking onto Zane's. "There is no other way. It's my responsibility. I've carried the weight of this power for too long, but now it is time to release it. For you, for my child, for all of us." Before Zane could protest, the woman closed her eyes, and a low hum filled the air. The ground beneath them trembled as energy surged from within her. Zane could feel it's an overwhelming force, a power so raw and untamed that it made his skin prickle. The air around them grew thick with energy as the woman began to concentrate, her body glowing faintly with an ethereal light. Zane stepped back, his breath shallow as he watched in awe. He knew she was doing something dangerous, something he couldn't comprehend. The energy surrounding her grew stronger with every passing second, filling the air with an intense pressure. "Please," Zane whispered, his voice filled with desperation. "Don't do this." "You don't have to," but the woman didn't hear him. She was lost in the power building within her, and in that moment, Zane realized there was no stopping her. She had made her choice. A brilliant flash of light erupted from her body, so bright that Zane had to shield his eyes. The ground beneath them cracked and splintered as the energy surged forward, streaking toward the alien soldiers and their ship. The blast was deafening, the force so intense that it seemed to shake the very heavens. The soldiers screamed, the warship trembling in the air as it was hit by the full force of the woman's power. Zane staggered back, his heart racing as the light began to fade. When it finally dissipated, all that remained was a silence so deep that it seemed to swallow the world whole. The soldiers were gone. The warship, once hovering proudly in the sky, had been reduced to a smoldering wreckage. There was no sign of life. Zane slowly turned back to the alien woman. Her body was slumped, her energy drained, her face pale. She had done what she promised. She had sacrificed everything to protect them. And yet, as Zane rushed to her side, cradling her in his arms, he realized that the greatest sacrifice of all was the one that still lay ahead. The world would never be the same, and neither would he. A new beginning. The silence was deafening. The air around Zane felt thick with the weight of what had just happened. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths as he held the alien woman in his arms, her life force slipping away with every passing second. He had seen death before, had even embraced it in moments of survival, but this was different. She had given everything for a future that now seemed uncertain, yet full of promise. Zane looked down at her face, pale but peaceful. The glow that had once enveloped her now dimmed. Her breathing was shallow, a quiet whisper in the air. Her child stood beside them, her little hands trembling as she watched the woman who had sacrificed so much to protect them. The alien girl's face was streaked with dirt and tears, but there was a strength in her eyes, the same strength Zane had seen in her mother. They had both been born into a war that seemed endless, but now, in the wake of this sacrifice, something new had begun. Zane could feel it, a shift in the air, a change in the very world they had fought to survive in, as Zane gently laid the woman down on the cold ground. His hand shaking, he made a vow to himself. She had given her life to ensure their survival, to ensure the future of her people, and he would honor that sacrifice. He would protect her child as his own. He would build the future she dreamed of, a future without war, without fear, and without the chains of endless conflict. The child, silent and still, approached them slowly. She reached out a trembling hand to her mother's face, brushing away the dirt and blood with a tenderness that broke Zane's heart. Her small fingers traced the alien woman's features, the gesture filled with love and sadness, a silent farewell. Zane watched her, unsure of how to comfort the child. Words felt useless in this moment. There was no easy way to explain the depth of what had just occurred. The alien woman had given her life to save them, and now the weight of that responsibility fell squarely on Zane's shoulders. But the child, in that moment, seemed to understand. She turned to Zane, her small face lifting with quiet resolve. "You'll keep us safe?" she asked, her voice trembling, but hopeful. "You'll keep my mother's promise." Zane swallowed hard. His throat was dry, the words sticking, but he knew. There was no turning back now. He had made that promise the moment he had chosen to help them, the moment he had decided to protect them. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about building a new life, a life that honored the sacrifices made along the way. "I will," he said, his voice rough but full of conviction. "I'll keep you safe. I'll make sure no one hurts you. No one hurts your mother's dream." The child nodded, her eyes steady and unwavering, a flicker of hope igniting in her gaze. Zane felt the weight of his promise settle on his shoulders like a mantle, heavy but necessary. The world around them had changed, but it wasn't over. They would rebuild. Together, Zane stood looking out over the desert. The battle had been won, but the war, in many ways, was just beginning. The alien soldiers who had once hunted them were gone, wiped out by the woman's sacrifice. But there were others out there, factions who would seek to take control of the ruins left behind. Powers who would try to dominate and destroy. It was a broken world they lived in, but it was a world that had the potential to be healed. He and the child would see to that. They would find a way to unite the surviving factions, to create a future built on trust, not fear. Zane took a deep breath, feeling the cold desert air fill his lungs. The horizon stretched before him, endless and open, full of possibility. The world had taken so much, but now it was time to give back. The future was not written yet, was theirs to create. The child tugged at his sleeve, her small hand warm in his. Zane looked down at her, her wide eyes watching him with a quiet intensity. "Where do we go now?" she asked softly. Zane smiled, a small but genuine smile. "We go forward," he said, kneeling down to meet her eye level. "We go wherever the future takes us, and we make it a future worth living." With that, they turned away from the desolate battlefield. The desert was still harsh and unforgiving, but Zane felt a renewed sense of purpose within him. He had been lost, wandering for so long, but now he had a reason to fight. He had a future to protect, a future where this child, this symbol of everything the alien woman had fought for, could grow up free of the violence and hate that had shaped their past. Together, they walked into the unknown, side by side, a new family forged from the ashes of war. And as they disappeared into the vast desert, Zane knew that this was only the beginning. They would rebuild. They would create something beautiful. And no matter the cost, he would keep his promise. He would never let her sacrifice be in vain.